All right, welcome to another edition of The Rundown. I'm going to be breaking down the Sunday games, and I'm going to start off between Sunday Night Football between Detroit and Kansas City. Kansas City won 27-17, and honestly, this is the second game that Kansas City has put together where they've looked good offensively and defensively. The other game was Baltimore. Against the Giants, it was pretty much a slog offensively, but this is the second game where Kansas City has looked really good on both sides of the ball. And Kansas City, they only punted one time and they had a turnover on downs where they couldn't convert anything on 4th and 1. And I was really impressed by their ability, even though it wasn't a lot, to run the ball. Pacheco ran for 51 yards on 12 carries, and I know even though those aren't a huge amount of yards, they really haven't been able to run the ball that well this season, and they've really had to run Mahomes more this season, even though that's not what the Chiefs prefer to do. They prefer to save his legs for the playoffs when they really need it, but this past season, they've just used his legs more because I think they know that they needed more juice from Mahomes from his legs, but this time around, they didn't need his legs that much. He definitely had some scrambling yards for sure, but there weren't many designed runs this game. And Mahomes threw the ball pretty well. He threw for like 264 yards. Now, Detroit was pretty banged up in their secondary with Khalil Dorsey, DJ Reed, and Terrion Arnold going out. But nonetheless, I still think that they were pretty impressive. Detroit offensively kind of stalled a little bit. Their first drive of the game, they were really, really impressive. They were able to move the ball up and down the field. That 4th and goal where Goff got that touchdown, unfortunately, it was an illegal motion, and the touchdown had to be called back, and they had to settle for a field goal. And they did get a touchdown in the second quarter, but after that, they really just couldn't get anything going. In the passing game, they couldn't really get anything going. Amon-Ra, he had a drop on a 4th and 2 late in the second quarter when they were down 13-10. That certainly could have changed things up, and maybe if they had gotten a field goal, they could have tied the game, and I don't know, maybe something interesting would have happened. They play Tampa Bay next week, so hopefully they'll be able to get the passing game better. Mac Jones was able to have a field day with practically no superstar receivers, and Sam Darnold was able to have a field day. So hopefully this was just a blip, and Detroit can get their passing game going next week. But the end of the game, that's where the major news happened. Brian Branch at the end of the game just decided to attack Juju Smith-Schuster, and that was ridiculous. You just can't be doing that. And the NFL probably has to suspend him for a game or maybe two. I would preferably just go one game, but he has to be suspended. That just can't be allowed. And I know that Juju Smith-Schuster can antagonize sometimes, and I think there was a play in the game that caused Brian Branch to go off, but nonetheless, you still have to stay composed. And kudos to Dan Campbell for saying that that's unacceptable, and I'm sure that he's going to address it with Branch and make sure that that isn't an issue going forward. But that's probably going to be a tough loss, them losing Branch for a game or two, because like I said, their secondary is pretty banged up, and Baker Mayfield, he's been throwing the ball very, very well, and I'm sure that he's going to have a field day against Detroit's secondary, and he's been having a field day against everyone, with receivers or not. And it looks like Mike Evans may or may not be coming back, so we'll have to see, and I'll talk more about Tampa Bay and San Francisco later. The Chiefs, on the other hand, they play the Raiders next week. I know division games can be weird, but I think they should be able to get going. They should rack up another dub, and then they play Buffalo, which is going to be a pretty tough game. But I think they should win against the Raiders and hopefully get into some good momentum going against Buffalo. This was the last week where they played without Rashee Rice, so getting Rashee Rice, hopefully that should make their offense more explosive. Now I want to switch to Seattle and Jacksonville. Seattle won 20-12, and this is the game that I've been waiting for in the Mike Macdonald era. I've been waiting for that signature win where we can win against a legit playoff team, and I think this is absolutely the win. Got to give credit to Seattle's defense. Trevor Lawrence, they sacked him 7 times, and they couldn't get anything going in the running game. I think Travis Etienne had 12 carries for 27 yards, and since they weren't able to get anything going in the running game, Trevor Lawrence had to throw 42 times, which honestly isn't that ideal. It's not ideal for any quarterback to throw 42 times, but especially for Trevor Lawrence, who can kind of be an up and down player, that's not where you want him to be throwing. Ideally he should be throwing somewhere in the 20s, but nonetheless he had to throw 42 times. And honestly, I think considering the circumstances and considering how Seattle's defense was getting after him, I think he actually played really, really well. He made some really big time throws early in the first quarter. He had a big throw to Brian Thomas Jr. on a 3rd and 16 that led them for a touchdown. Unfortunately, the kicker, he also kind of screwed him over. He missed the extra point, and he missed a 50-yarder, and he certainly didn't do the Jags any favors whatsoever. And 4 points in an NFL game is a lot. And when the margin of error is so thin, you just can't afford to miss those many points. Excuse my phone. Seattle's offense, on the other hand, was a little bit up and down. We got a field goal and touchdown in the first half, and got a touchdown in the first possession in the third quarter. But after that, Seattle's offense just wasn't able to get anything going. And I felt that when Seattle was getting into 3rd and long situations, we just sort of gave up. Whether it was 3rd and 11, 3rd and 13, Seattle was just throwing screen passes. And I just feel that Sam Darnold should have more respect from his coordinator and his coaches, because he's just been airing the ball out very, very well. And he should be able to throw at the line to gain or very close to it and, try to get a first down. But I don't know. For some reason, Seattle in this game just didn't trust him whatsoever. They've trusted him to throw the ball a lot in previous games, but just in this game, I felt that they didn't trust him enough. And they really should have trusted him more, because the running game was just non-existent. Kenneth Walker had 10 carries for 34 yards. Zach Charbonnet had 12 carries for 24 yards. And Darnold threw 27 times, and he had like 295 yards. I don't know. I felt he should have thrown at least 30 times, because just so many times I felt that we ran on 2nd and long, and Seattle's running game just wasn't able to get anything out of it, and that just left Seattle in a bad spot. So Darnold should have definitely thrown the ball way more, in my opinion. And Seattle was also 3 of 12 on 3rd down, so that also explains, getting into those 3rd and longs and just not trusting Darnold to throw at the line to game, and just running the ball way too many times where it is 3rd and long and Darnold just has to make something happen. They just should have let him air it out more. And there have been games like against Tampa Bay, like I talked about, where Darnold has thrown it a lot and where the running game actually did play well. But for some reason this time around, it didn't happen. But one thing I have to give Darnold credit for is he made the big plays when he needed to make the big plays. And because he was able to make the big plays, I feel that's why Seattle was able to pull out the win. Second quarter, he has a bomb to JSN for a touchdown off of play action that puts them up 10-6. Also, late in the fourth quarter, he had a 61-yard throw to AJ Barner, which practically ended the game, and they were able to run out the clock. And I talked about how you have to be able to make the big plays when they're open. And I talked about how Jalen Hurts missed Devontae Smith against the Giants. I talked about how Bo Nix has just missed deep throws to his receivers. And it'll cost you games if you're not able to hit them. And since Darnold was able to hit them, I feel that's why Seattle was able to pull out the win. Jacksonville, nonetheless, they still had their shots to win the game. I mean, other than that touchdown possession, Seattle was pretty much punting for the most part. So they had their shots, but unfortunately, a lot on Trevor Lawrence's shoulders, and with no running game, it's going to be hard to win that way, especially against Seattle, who's one of the top-ranked defensive teams and is getting after the quarterback very, very well. And I was impressed with the defense because even though Seattle didn't have a secondary, I still feel for the most part we were able to do a good job on the receivers and hold them off on critical, key, crucial downs. So good win for Seattle. We'll see how they play against Houston. Jacksonville is going to play against the Rams next week, if I'm not mistaken. And I feel that should be a pretty good game for Trevor Lawrence because the Rams defense, especially their secondary, has just not been good. And I feel that's something that Trevor Lawrence should be able to take advantage of. He is kind of an up and down player. Sometimes he makes big plays, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he has flags that are on him. He's just never going to be a consistent player, but he'll definitely have big games for sure. So we'll see what happens next week. Now I want to talk about San Francisco and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay wins 30-19. And first of all, prayers up to Fred Warner. He dislocated his ankle in the game, and he's going to be out for the rest of the season. And the injuries just continue to mount up for San Francisco. And I've talked about how it's just weird that they continue to just have injuries to their players. And I know in Fred Warner's case, it was just a freak play, but nonetheless, it's still strange how this continuously happens to San Francisco. Hopefully, they can get healthy next year, but this year, I don't know. It just feels like it's a little bit cooked. But even though it is a little bit cooked in terms of health, they're still able to pull out wins nonetheless. In this game, though, they had their shot. After a slow first quarter by both teams, both offenses, they started to ramp it up later. I know Mac Jones had 2 interceptions, which isn't ideal. I don't think the first one was his fault exactly, but I think considering the facts with the injuries and whatnot, I still think that he played a pretty good game, and he had some crazy throws. He had a great 56-yard throw to Kendrick Bourne in the second quarter, which led to a touchdown. And it's not just deep throws; he consistently got the ball out of his hands and got it to receivers under tight coverage. Unfortunately for the San Francisco 49ers, they just couldn't convert in the red zone when they needed to, and because of that, they had to settle for field goals far too often. And if they were able to convert some touchdowns, they certainly could have made it an interesting game, but they couldn't. And they had their shot in the fourth quarter to tie it up. They were down 27-19, but unfortunately, Mac Jones, he throws an interception on a 4th and 5, and he made great throws all day, but I don't know what he saw in that play. It looked like it was pretty heavily contested, and it doesn't look like he saw the defender, and he was able to just pick it off. And I think Mac probably got a little bit too confident because he was making great throws all day and he thought he could just fit that ball in, but he wasn't able to do it that time around. And Baker Mayfield, on the other hand, he is continuing his MVP campaign and he's picking up where he's left out. He's just been wheeling and dealing. But I want to talk about one run he had, and it was the third quarter, 4 minutes left. They're up 20-19, and this is a huge momentum back-breaking play for San Francisco's defense. And he was able to escape pressure on a 3rd and 14, and it looked like he was going to get sacked. And even Kevin Harlan said he was probably going to get sacked, but he just ran and he was able to get the first down. And they were up 20-19 at that point. And if San Francisco's defense does their job and gets Baker down, San Francisco's offense can get the ball back and potentially take a lead with either a field goal or a touchdown. But they just weren't able to get him down. And on that play, Tampa Bay's offense was able to get a touchdown out of it. And Baker was still able to air the ball out. Emeka Egbuka had a hammy injury in the second quarter, and he already didn't have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and he made some big throws to Tez Johnson, Cameron Johnson, and Sterling Shepard made some big plays. Both the Johnsons got touchdowns, and it really feels like Baker has just mastered the offense, which is really interesting because he's had 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years, but nonetheless, it just looks like he's been with the same offensive coordinator for many years, and he's just making it work no matter who's the receiver, and it's just plug and play for Tampa Bay. So kudos to them and their coaching. If I had an MVP vote and the season ended today, I would probably vote Baker as my MVP. We'll see if he's able to get it going. But yeah, kudos to Tampa Bay and their offense. And it looks like I said before, Mike Evans may come back. And if he comes back, that's going to be a huge help, especially if Egbuka isn't going to play. Now I want to talk about Miami and the Chargers. The Chargers pull it out with the last second field goal. They win 29-26. And even though the Dolphins stink as a team, I still think this is a pretty good win for the Chargers. The Chargers, they're on backup alignment. And when you're on backup alignment, it's just hard to succeed that way. But despite that, their offense still looked pretty great. Kimani Vidal had 124 yards, and Justin Herbert was able to throw for 264 yards, and him and Ladd McConkey, they just got it going. Ladd McConkey had 100 yards on 7 receptions, and him and Ladd especially had a good connection, especially on that last drive to get them into field goal range. Dolphins, I got to give them credit for coming back. This was still like, a good game from them. They were down 26-13 in the fourth quarter, but they were able to string two touchdown drives together and go up 27-26 with 46 seconds left. And if Miami's defense is able to do their job and get to Herbert or like cover the receivers well, they would have been able to win this game. But unfortunately, their defense just can't do anything. And even though Miami was able to come back, I guess for them, there's no point for moral victories because they're just 1-5. And changes are definitely going to come to Miami because Tua once again called out his teammates talking about how they've been late for player only meetings, and clearly it's frustrating in Miami, and there's clearly just dissension, and it doesn't seem like everybody is rowing on one boat for the same goal. And in order to succeed in the NFL, where there's 53 players and there's an offense and a defense and a special teams, you got to be able to be row in one direction in order to succeed. Excuse me. Whew. Because if you can't, then you're just not going to be able to go very far. I mean, look at the Eagles. They're successful and talented, but they've just had dissension this past season, and because of that, they haven't been able to succeed. And honestly, it's a credit to them that they were able to succeed last season because they had a little bit of dissension last season with the passing game, but they were still able to pull it out because they're so talented and they have like Pro Bowl level players on like almost every single position. And if you're going to have dissension, you pretty much have to be the Eagles, where you're super duper talented. And Miami is not super duper talented, where they can just get away with dissension and just having a divided locker room. I talked about how earlier in the season I did not like Tua calling out his teammates, and I didn't like it again. It stinks that players are late for player only meetings, and they should show more professionalism, but that's not how it's been in Miami. And if they don't respect Mike McDaniel, I guess they're not going to respect Tua, even though they should respect Tua more because he's the guy on the field who's making all the decisions. And the fact that they're not listening to him and showing up for important meetings just shows that they're pretty checked out, and that's unfortunate. I talked about how Mike McDaniel is probably going to get fired. He's going to get fired sooner rather than later. He should be a hotshot offensive coordinator, and teams should be calling his phone for them to be his offensive coordinator. And I think he should just take a few years off before he becomes a head coach and he can knows what it takes to be in a leadership position. I think X's and O's wise he's pretty good, but just when it comes to the leadership aspect, I just don't think he has that down pat all the way yet. Now I want to talk about the Cowboys and Panthers. The Panthers surprisingly won 30-27, although it shouldn't be that surprising. Certainly wasn't expecting this to be a ball game. I really thought that Dallas would win this game, but it's just been the same issue that I've been talking about all season, and that's just their defense. Their defense is absolutely awful, and people were calling this the Rico Dowdle revenge game, and it certainly was a revenge game for him. He had 30 carries for 183 yards, and it wasn't just in the running game where he was killing the Cowboys. He was also killing them in the passing game. He had 56 yards passing, and that was the most that a receiver got for the Carolina Panthers. So he was killing them on both ends. The Cowboys did get some pressure on Bryce Young, but ultimately it didn't matter because he was just able to get the ball out of his hands very, very quickly. And Matt Eberflus, his defense has just not been able to get critical stops when they've needed to. And it doesn't seem like they have anything going whatsoever together. The secondary stinks. Quarterbacks are just throwing all over the field against them. Pass rush hasn't been great either, and he's probably going to get the axe, and he should probably get the axe, but it doesn't matter who your defensive coordinator is. Nonetheless, they still have to get more talent, and if they do get more talent, hopefully they can turn things around, but that's something that Jerry Jones is really, really going to need to focus on in the offseason. And I'll give Jerry credit this. Even though he didn't fix the defense this time around, and the defense was awful last year, he has been making changes when there is a side of the ball that needs help. He went out and got George Pickens when it was clear that they needed a receiver next to CeeDee Lamb, and that's been a great addition so far. Now George Pickens is in a contract year, so who knows how he's going to look going forward, but he's looked good so far. And I know things change from week to week, but this game should just prove how bad the Jets are. Uh, the fact that Carolina was able to get going offensively and the Jets weren't able to do anything offensively against the Cowboys just proves even more how much of a bad team they are. And I know that on the scoreboard it says that they scored 22 points, but honestly, those were garbage points. When the game really, really mattered, the Jets weren't able to do jack offensively. So I'll talk more about them a little bit later, but I want to give credit to Dak Prescott. It's not his fault that they lost this game. He's been playing at an MVP level. Unfortunately, I just don't think he's going to get the MVP because the defense has been so bad and they're just not going to be able to win many, many games. And it's kind of going to be like Joe Burrow last year, where Burrow was phenomenal, but the defense was so bad they just weren't able to get the wins and they weren't able to sneak into the playoffs. And the fact that he's balling out with no CeeDee Lamb, with George Pickens as a number one, and with an offensive line that's in flux is just a kudos to his greatness. I gotta say, Dak is a pretty smart and intellectual quarterback, and he's been doing things pre-snap, and it just really feels that under a new offensive guy, he just has the offensive down pat, and it feels like he's been in the offense for many, many years. So, he's just another one of those smart guys, and he has to be pretty smart because his athleticism is not the same anymore. He doesn't exactly have the strongest arm, so he needs to do it from his mind, and he's been able to do it so far. And I feel with Dak in past seasons, it felt like he got garbage yards for the most part when they weren't in games. I don't feel like this season. I feel this season he's been doing it when it matters the most, even though his team hasn't been very good, and he's just been carrying this team, and it's just unfortunate that it's all gonna go to waste. And unfortunately, the Cowboys are gonna lose many games that they should have won, and it's all because of their defense. So hopefully they can get that fixed. And speaking of games that should have been won, but they lost, the Jets lost 13-11 to the Denver Broncos in London. And talk about a disaster class. The Jets continue to just jet it up. Justin Fields had 45 passing yards, and the team had negative 10 passing yards. And honestly, it would have been better if the Jets didn't show up offensively. If the whole team just decided to stay back in the hotel, they would have been better off doing that, because even when they showed up on the field, they were worse than that. So just horrible all around. Aaron Glenn, I like him and I'm rooting for him. And I thought he was great in Detroit, and I thought he did a pretty good job with that defense, especially last year when they were pretty injured. But he's just been bad as a head coach so far. I know that it's the Jets, and no head coach can really succeed with the Jets, but he just has not been good enough. And it just doesn't seem that he has it all together with this team, whether it's penalties or just miscommunication. And I mean, in the end of the first half, they're at the 4th and 1. They're at the 48-yard line. They have like 10 seconds left on the clock, and they're just hoping to like get a field goal, or at least that's what the fans were hoping. Uh, it didn't seem like the Jets knew what to do, and then Garrett Wilson, him and Aaron Glenn kind of have like a heated argument, and Garrett Wilson talked about at the end of the game how he just was confused on what they were trying to do, and it didn't look like they were trying. And I don't know if they would have gotten the line to gain or not, or if they would have been able to get in field goal range, but I mean, you should at least try, and they just weren't trying whatsoever. They had their chances to win this game, and Bo Nix was not really great offensively, but they just somehow blew it up. Justin Fields had 9 sacks for 55 yards, and that's the Justin Fields experience. He just holds on to the ball way too long, and he just can't read the field very well, and he just misses open receivers. And I understand that the offensive line isn't particularly great and that they were just getting beaten, especially their edge tackles, but you still got to be better than that. And everyone gets caught up in Justin Fields being so athletic, and people still want to believe that he has a chance of being a great quarterback. But physical traits, they honestly don't matter. If you don't have it up here in the mind, then you really can't be a successful quarterback. And Justin Fields, I just don't feel he has the football IQ to just be one of those great quarterbacks. I feel he's probably going to be, for the rest of his career, a lower end starting quarterback or just a backup, honestly. And I think that the Jets know that Justin Fields isn't exactly the answer, and they're probably going to get a top 5 pick. And I'm not saying you should draft a quarterback for the sake of it. Every draft class doesn't have a good quarterback, but if they have a quarterback that they're confident in this draft class and that they can realistically get in the draft, I feel they should go all in for it because Justin Fields is not the guy. And I don't know if Aaron Glenn is going to stick around in New York or not. I personally wouldn't fire him yet. I'd give him another year, even though this year has been a disaster. But considering it's the Jets, um, I don't know. And Eric Mangini talked about this last year where there was a game the Jets played in London, and he said that if Robert Saleh loses that game in London, he's probably going to get fired because Woody Johnson just does not like losing those London games. And nonetheless, the Jets lost, and Robert Saleh was fired. Now, Robert Saleh was in his third year at that point. Aaron Glenn is in his first year, but again, considering it's the Jets and Woody Johnson is a horrible owner, you don't know what the heck you're going to do. And they have to get a quarterback because they don't get a quarterback, Aaron Glenn is just not going to keep his job. And it doesn't even have to be a franchise quarterback. Get someone like a Mac Jones who has like smart processing power and can read the field very very quickly and can like go through his reads at a good enough pace and like he can like throw to open receivers or under tight coverage. I don't think Mac Jones is a superstar, but if you surround him with good talent, he can certainly do some things, and that's what the Jets need because if the Jets are able to get a quarterback, they can just build around him. And it doesn't matter if you have like other talent. If you just don't have the quarterback, you're just not going to be able to win. I mean, Zach Wilson had talent around him in the Jets. He was horrible. Justin Fields, even though he doesn't have a lot of talent around him, I still don't think he's a very good quarterback. And the fact that Pittsburgh cut him and decided to go for a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers should say a lot considering that they knew that Aaron Rodgers was going to be on a 1-year deal and he was going to retire after the season most likely, and they wouldn't want a guy who's in his late 20s to be their quarterback. Just shows a lot about what they think about Justin Fields. And I feel bad for Garrett Wilson because it's clear that his talent is just getting wasted there. I talked about Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, not the guys. Unfortunately, the whole Aaron Rodgers thing didn't work out. If he didn't get injured, I still think his Jets tenure would have gotten better. And who knows, maybe he would have stuck around with the Jets and maybe Robert Saleh would have been able to keep his job. But unfortunately, that's not how things turned out to be. And I hope for Garrett Wilson's sake, it's a Terry McLaurin situation where Terry McLaurin for many years just played with bad quarterbacks, and all of a sudden they land a franchise quarterback in Jaden Daniels who can be that guy for the next decade. I hope for his sake he's able to do that. But even if the Jets do draft that guy, who knows if he'll be able to do that with the Jets because the Jets are just terrible at developing quarterbacks. We all saw what they did to Sam Darnold, and now he's balling out with the Seahawks. So even if they do draft a quarterback, I don't know if they'll be able to develop him, and I don't know if Aaron Glenn is exactly going to be that guy. He hasn't exactly instilled a lot of confidence in me yet in terms of him being a good head coach and being able to lead that franchise out of the dumps, but I'm willing to give him another year. And yeah, that's about all I have for you guys today. I will be back Wednesday to break down the Monday night football games and some of the other storylines going around the NFL. And yeah, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.